Hello everybody and welcome back to the YouTube. Now today I'm going to be travelling up to Aerospace Bristol for Bristol Vintage Bus Group's mini running day there. Now usually it happens at their base in Brislington at their Flowers Hill depot. However, apparently the mini running day has outgrown the actual site at Flowers Hill. So today they decided to hold it at Aerospace Bristol in partnership with Aerospace Bristol. So let's head up towards Bristol now on the train. Now I had to take the first train of the day from Highbridge and Burnham up towards Bristol, and it was busy, but what do you expect? This is the first train from a lot of these stations, or the second train if you're travelling north of Weston-super-Mare. However, the cross-country train I ended up taking to Bristol Parkway, where there was a feeder bus operating from, was completely unacceptable. The train was completely overcrowded, and it was exactly the same on the way back, so it wasn't like it was just an anomaly. I have heard that cross-country have a shortage of trains, but come on, this is a bit extreme. Anyway, after waiting at the wrong bus stop, here is Badgers, a Volvo B7RLE Bright Eclipse Urban, arriving into Bristol Parkway. I've been on this before, and this is an absolutely great motor. Here I am leaving Bristol Parkway Station on Badgers, which I believe was old First West of England 66726, on my way towards the mini bus rally at Aerospace Bristol. Here I am arriving at Aerospace Bristol. Now although this was quite a good site, it is a little bit out of the way, especially if you're used to travelling to the site of Brislington, but more importantly it is quite a tight squeeze for a lot of these buses, especially since they have to enter the site via the car park, which is, well, not the most spacious of car parks in the world, and the exit that most of the buses, with the exception of the Bristol Parkway feeder buses, used was not much better, to be honest. It was extremely narrow. So although this is quite a good site, I can already see the bus rally outgrowing the site very, very quickly. Anyway, Here I am now at Aerospace Bristol, and after finding my way through to where the buses were being located, apart from the feeder buses to Bristol Parkway, I found quite a good selection of buses there, although most of them were old things like this piece of junk. But there was an open topper, so if you fancied a very fresh day out, you could always go on this open topper. Here on the right, we can see a lineup of more modern vehicles, which are the vehicles I'm more interested in. Here is an old bus, I think it's ex-Australia, but I'm not too sure, as well as the PSV Group's Volvo B70L ALX 400 and their Berries Coaches Step Entrance Dennis Dart. Here is the City Lines Collection's 2 buses, which is another Step Entrance Dennis Dart, as well as a Bristol VR, both wearing the very nice original First City Line livery, which I believe was introduced when First brought some of the operations in Bristol. Anyway, my first ride and my only ride, with the exception of the Bristol Parkway feeder buses, was the PSV Group's Volvo B70L Alexander ALX 400. The City Line collection also has one. In my opinion, this one is way better, as it hoovers a lot, and well, it just sounds amazing. Both are extremely similar though, with the exception of the engine noise. Anyway, let's take an amazing ride on this around to Bristol Parkway Station and back towards Aerospace Bristol. Here I am arriving back at Bristol Parkway Station. I would take this amazing Volvo B70L ALX 400 back to Aerospace Bristol. However, this service wasn't very well advertised, especially online and at Bristol Parkway Station itself, so I imagine a lot of people weren't actually expecting this bus to turn up. Anyway, I would come back to Bristol Parkway later on one of the other feeder buses, as this technically isn't part of the feeder service. However, let's head back over to Aerospace Bristol, taking a slightly different route than the route that Badgers took on the designated feeder service. Here I am arriving back at Aerospace Bristol. Here you can see the City Lines Collection Bristol VR double-decker leaving the site, which was quite a shame to see actually, as I've always wanted to go on this motor. At the Bristol bus rally at the Brislington parking lot earlier in the year, I didn't manage to get a ride on this. I can't even remember if it was there, and well, this time around I just so happened to miss it. It was leaving as I was arriving, and I didn't see it go out in the time that I was here. However, we are also following Badgers on its service from Bristol Parkway. So here is Badgers reversing next to the static Leyland Olympian. This vehicle always seems to be static at a lot of these events. Does anybody know why? I would imagine it's because it's basically a model shop inside. There's a few Badger line bits and bobs, some model buses and some clothes. Here is that really weird Bristol bus. I think it's ex-Australia, however I could be wrong. It's definitely from another country, leaving Aerospace Bristol, not on a public service, but to go and get some fuel. And here is the B7 again, lining up to do a round trip on the service to Westbury-on-Trim. Here is the City Lines Collection Step Entrance Dart alongside the PSV Group's Dennis Dart, which used to operate with Berry's coaches. I haven't been on the Berry's coaches Dart since the New Year's running day. I can't remember which year it was, but it was certainly at least 2 years ago. It is a shame it hasn't done any more runs since then, but I think it has suffered with a few problems, and unfortunately, neither of the darts got out today. Here is the B7 doing another run to Westbury-on-Trim an hour after it left to go to Westbury-on-Trim. Now, from here onwards, the only other run I managed to do was the feeder service back to Bristol Parkway. That was a really good run, stay tuned for that, but unfortunately, not many of the modern vehicles came out after this, and I'd already been on this Volvo B70L, although it was amazing. Here is my last and final Bristol Parkway feeder bus arriving into Aerospace Bristol to take me to the Bristol Parkway station, this time running via Cribbs Causeway, as the feeder service to and from Aerospace Bristol and Bristol Parkway operates via a loop system and serves Cribbs Causeway bus station first and then finally serving Bristol Parkway last before returning to Aerospace Bristol. Now, just before I board the A-Bus DAF DB250 Optare Spectra, otherwise known as Kaiser, please accept my apologies for not getting many footage of buses, like not many ride-ons. It's just there weren't really many buses that took my interest today, and some of the ones that did, like the Darts, didn't go out, or at least I missed their runs, although saying that the Berries Coaches Dart was advertised not to do any runs, so that's kind of fair enough. And unfortunately I just missed that Bristol VR, and I didn't see it do any more runs during the day whilst I was there. Anyway, let's not get too bogged down in stuff that I didn't do. Something I did do was get another ride, another backseat ride on this amazing DAF DB250. here I am arriving at Cribbs Causeway bus station. Although this is quite a useful link because you could technically park your car here without paying as long as the shopping centre didn't notice you weren't actually using the shopping centre and instead you were using the feeder bus. There are also a lot of local bus services, although not so many on a Sunday compared to a weekday or a Saturday, that serve the bus station, especially from South Bristol. I think you get the 1 and 2 routes here, but I could be wrong, but you definitely get a lot of the 70 series of routes, which do definitely originate in South Bristol. I believe they originate in the Hengrove Park area, near the Hengrove bus depot. Anyway, not many passengers, if any passengers, boarded the bus at Cribbs Causeway, and quite a few actually got off to take pictures and go and have a look around the shopping centre. So here I am now, leaving the Cribbs Causeway area, because there's not just them out here, there's loads and loads of retail parks and other spaces here, heading towards Bristol Parkway. Also, sorry if some of this stuff doesn't really make sense, I don't really use a script for any of this stuff, so it's kind of just made up. am arriving back at Bristol Parkway. Now, just before I leave you here, I do have a few bus pictures that I took on my way back home, because on the way back home, instead of getting a lift with my parents, because of course the 21 bus doesn't arrive into Highbridge until about 15 minutes after the first train towards Bristol leaves. However, I did take the 21 bus back home, and I did manage to get a few more pictures and videos of the overcrowded cross-country trains. Anyway, there goes that daft BB250, and one small request I have is that at some of these bus events, can a bus please bring some other vehicles other than the DAFs? Sure, I love the DAFs, but after a while, they become a bit repetitive. Something like a Volvo B70L would be great. Now, I'm unsure if they still have it, but there used to be a Volvo B70L regularly operating on the 22 service between Twerton and Bath University when a bus operated the route. So to see that vehicle out and about again would be amazing. I definitely know that they have Scania Omnideckers that sometimes operate school services and shopper buses, so to see some of these out as well at bus rallies would be pretty good. Especially the one that has recently had a new paint job into a A-bus livery. It's kind of a mix between the new A-bus livery and the Centurion travel livery. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll leave you with some pictures and videos of the cross-country trains, the GWR trains, which by the way were much better than the cross-country trains, and the 21 bus I got on the way home. Bye everyone!
Bad is that you have to drink so much water when you're using it. It's 5 grams a day. 5 grams is the most amount. Any more than that, it will just be pissed out.
I know what it is. You've got to be this, yeah. Yeah, because Freddie would take 3 cups and then like he would like eat it.
Yeah, it's easy.
I think that's disgusting.
And if you give it water, it's like the sound of water with each of
Well, just for the this, just get more red. Yeah.
I mean, well, duh.
Let's get one of the other mates because we're getting all the other end. I did